I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Ken Dwyer. He's a Furman grad, ROTC, commissioned to the infantry branch, U.S. Army Ranger and Special Forces. 4 combat tours, 3 before his injuries and 1 afterwards. In 2006, he sustained life-threatening injuries in Afghanistan, which he'll discuss. He went on to complete a master's degree, a couple of company commands, including HHC, a 3rd Special Forces Group. He is currently the garrison commander at Hunter Army Airfield. I won't read all of his awards and decorations, but I will say his wife, Jenny, of 17 years, I'm sure she can relate to a lot of the things that were brought up by our spouses. Without further ado, Colonel Dwyer.
So I know you guys have a really packed schedule, and when you look down the list of all the speakers and you get down to, general, lieutenant colonel, congressman, so you look at that list, and I'm surprised and I'm impressed that we haven't thinned out the population more than we have, so thank you for being here. The ones that are really committed are still here, so thank you. So I want to thank General Gerard for the opportunity to just come here and take a few minutes just to talk about how we, as military leaders, can set the conditions for our airmen and our soldiers to overcome any adversity that they may face. But the first thing that I have to ask is, how many golfers do we have in the room? And you don't be afraid to raise your hand. It's all right, I know. So everybody in the room, I'm sure, is familiar that golfers keep a scoring index. They call it a handicap. That's important to the story. So a couple years back, I was at graduate school, Naval Postgraduate School out in Monterey, California, and we had a golf tournament. The guest speaker for that evening's banquet was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I won't mention his name. At the time, he was a Navy admiral. And I was warming up on the driving range, and the admiral comes up behind me, and he starts warming up, hitting some golf balls. And I thought, wow, as a young major, what a great opportunity to introduce myself to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So I turned around and I introduced myself to the chairman. I said, sir, my name's Ken Dwyer. I'm a student out here at NPS. He immediately asked me, of course, about my missing hand, missing eye. I said, I lost those in Afghanistan in 2006, sir, but it's not a big deal. So we talked for a couple of minutes, and I went back to hitting some golf balls, and I'm not a good golfer. Colonel Boone can attest to that. But I just happened to hit the 3 most beautiful golf shots that I had ever hit in my life, all in a row, right in front of the admiral. So he comes up behind me, and he puts his hand on my shoulder. He said, wow, that is really impressive. Has your handicap improved since you've lived in Monterey? And I looked at the admiral and I said, no, sir, my hand is still missing. Which I thought was the funniest thing I had ever said in my entire life. But he did not appreciate it, and he looked at me and he said, and I went from being Ken to being Major, like really quick, and you guys all know what that means. And he said, Major, that's not what I meant. So I started to do some tap dancing and some backpedaling, and I looked at the chairman and I said, sir, I acknowledge that I was just making a joke. And the admiral looked at me and he shook his head and he left the driving range. So that day, I think I caught the chairman off guard, and he didn't appreciate my sense of humor, but having a sense of humor, and Ms. Gerard said it best earlier, is an important tool for us to have when we talk about resilience. And I'll get back to that a little bit later. But first of all, I want to talk about August 19th, 2006. I had the absolute greatest job that any man could ever have. I was the detachment commander, Special Forces Team ODA 325 combat dive team on my 3rd tour in Afghanistan. Near the beginning of the tour, and we received intelligence that we had about 20 to 25 insurgents in the area, and we're like, okay, we got that. We were going to go after these guys, and it ended up, as things sometimes turn out, you get bad intel, and it wasn't 20 to 25, it was more like 125, and we ended up in a bad spot really quick. During the course of that engagement, I was struck with a rocket-propelled grenade right in my left hand and blew up in my face, and I caught a bunch of, took the hand off from the blast. Caught a lot of shrapnel in my face and my right arm. I had chunks of metal. that went through the front of my neck and out the back and side, split my trachea into 4 pieces, holes all the way through my esophagus. Chunk of metal that hit me in the right arm that actually hit my brachial artery. And as my medic got to me, and he told me this later, he said, when I got to you and I took your right arm and I peeled it off your body, he said, 1 squirt of your blood and I was covered from head to toe. And so I talk about this because it's important that we understand that this is our job. This is what we do. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is what we expect of our soldiers every day and our airmen every day, is to put their lives on the line so that we can all have the things that we have in life. And so we as leaders need to understand. So I don't want to get really into the gory details, but you need to understand that I should not have lived. But I did because my team sergeant and my medic cared more about my life than they cared about their own. And so this is something that we talk about a lot to our soldiers and folks in the military. But if you ever want to see magic happen, if you ever want to see miracles made, create a team where every individual on that team is more concerned with the well-being and the success of the man or woman on his left and on his right than he is of his own. Because that's when magic really happens. And we are so fortunate to be blessed with men and women that we work with every day that are willing to do that. So my team sergeant and my medic got to me, and they absolutely worked a miracle, put me back together, kept me alive for 52 minutes until we got evac on the ground to take me out of there. And I spent the next 6 months in the hospital recovering from my wounds. And I want to talk to you about a life-changing moment that I had in the hospital that allowed me to gain the strength to continue to get to the point where I can still serve today. Because when I first got to the hospital, I didn't believe that I would be able to overcome what had happened to me, and that I would be able to continue to serve, and that I would be able to continue to jump out of airplanes, and that I would go back to Afghanistan as a commander in 3rd Special Forces Groups, leading troops with one hand and one eye. But I had some tremendous people around me that showed me it was possible. And the one specifically that I want to talk about, my son and the spouse panel this morning was absolutely amazing, because my family is my rock. My wife is amazing. When I got hurt, my son was 3 years old, my wife was pregnant, and I was barely hanging on in the hospital. And so the very first time that they were able to bring my son into the hospital, I had finally gotten the trach removed and the feeding tube pulled out of my face and some of the holes patched up. And they had told my son, hey, Daddy lost his hand, he lost his eye, he's got a bunch of boo-boos, but we want you to see him. So I could, about 3 or 4 weeks post, getting to the hospital, I could finally talk again. And I remember my grandfather brought my son into the room, and he lifted him up and he set him down in the bed. My 3-year-old, he looks at me and he goes, Daddy, where are your teeth? Because they told him about the hand and the eye and everything else, but they didn't tell him I got all my teeth blown out. And I said, son, I'm going to get some new teeth. He said, okay, are they going to be white teeth? Yeah, son, I don't know. They're going to be tooth-colored teeth. That was his only question. And then he leans over, and I had a stitch line from my elbow to my chest on my right arm from the damage from the round, from the RPG. And that had just been closed up, and it was still oozing from that stitch line. And my 3-year-old son leans over, gives me a huge kiss right on the middle of that oozing stitch line, and he looks at me and he said, all better now, Daddy, let's play baseball. And do you want to talk about having a positive influence on your life that will allow you to push beyond the limits that you thought you were capable of? And for those of you in the room who are parents, which I imagine is most of you, that was a life-changing moment for me, and that's what I built on. That moment where I decided, hey, it's time for you to quit feeling sorry for yourself, get out of this bed, heal, and play baseball with your son, was the moment that I used to build on to get back to where I am today. So when we talk about setting the conditions for a resilient military, the very first thing I always tell people is you must surround yourself with positive people. So we've got that in spades, right? When you look around the room and we think about all the amazing things that we accomplish, and civilians will often ask me, why did you choose to stay in the military after you got hurt, after you lost your hand, after you lost your eye, after you went through such egregious injuries? Why did you choose to stay? And what I want to say is if you have to ask me that question, then you wouldn't understand the answer. But that sounds really arrogant and smug, so I don't say that. What I say is I get to go to work every single day with men and women who are not only willing to die for what they believe in, but they're willing to, if necessary, die for each other. You want to talk about something that's powerful, something that's magic. So when you talk about surrounding yourself with positive people, we've got that in spades. We've got it covered. But here's what we have to do as Army leaders, as Air Force leaders, as military leaders. We have to go beyond surrounding ourselves with those positive people, but we have to become the kind of positive mentors for our soldiers that we push them to accomplish things they do not believe they could accomplish on their own. How many times in each one of your careers have you had a leader, whether verbally or non-verbally, set limitations on what he thought you could do? And how many times have we done that to our soldiers? And what I tell, when I get a chance to speak to young people and when I get a chance to speak to young soldiers, I always tell them, don't ever let anyone set your limitations. I had a whole lot of people that told me after I got hurt, can't stay in the Army, can no longer jump out of airplanes, can't go back to Afghanistan. And when I got back to 3rd Special Forces Group, I went to see my battalion commander and I said, "Sir, when can I get back on a jump?" And the colonel looked at me and said, "You know you've got one hand, right?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'm aware of that. When can I get back on a jump?" And he said, "You're not ready." I said, "Roger that, sir." So I went and I found one of my non-commissioned officers and I said, "Hey, Rob, I need you to work with me after hours and on the weekends to figure out every possible contingency that I need to show the battalion commander that I am prepared to do this with one hand and one eye." So we did. We spent weeks out on the mock-up and at the rigger shed going over, exiting procedures and static line control and maneuverability and all the different things that you have to have. And so we could prove to the battalion commander that I could do this. And so I went back to the battalion commander. I said, "Sir, let me show you what I've learned, and let me tell you I'm ready to jump out of an airplane again." And the battalion commander looked at me and said, "Sounds great. I'm going to jump out right beside you." And that was powerful to me because he backed me up. He allowed me to push myself further than I thought I could go. That's the kind of leaders that we need to be for our soldiers and for our airmen, to empower them. Empower them to reach beyond what they think they can accomplish. So number one, surround yourself with positive people. Number two, and keys to developing resiliency, is to find your purpose in life and live that purpose every day. I was at a really dark place in my recovery a couple of years back. And I took that deep introspective look that's all required for us to do from time to time, deep into your soul, and say, why am I here? Why do I exist? What is my purpose? Because if you're not living for your purpose every day, that's not really life. And the determination that I made was that it's bigger than me. It's bigger than any one individual. The reason I'm here, my purpose in life, is to enhance the lives of the people that I love. And of course, that starts with my wife, and it starts with my son, and it goes to my daughter. But it also extends beyond that to my military family, because I will tell you, as we all leaders should feel, we have to love our soldiers and our airmen. Because the most important thing that any leader can do, most important quality for any leader to have is to care. And you can't fake it. You can't make it up. You either care or you don't care. So enhance the lives of those people that I love. And you have to commit to that purpose every day. Recommit to that purpose every day, however it may be for each one of you, because everybody's purpose is different. So number one, surround yourself with positive people and be the kind of positive person that pushes people beyond what they thought they could achieve. Number two, find your purpose in life and live that purpose every day. And finally, I'll go back to where I started. You got to have a sense of humor in life to get through the hard times, because life is difficult, and that's not just in the military. It's not exclusive. The military does not own exclusive rights to adversity. It applies to every person who has ever walked the face of the earth. As the late, great Reverend Billy Graham once said, life is full of peaks and valleys. And the peaks are great for the views, but the valleys are where the fruit is grown. But you have to appreciate the small things in life that make you laugh. The things that we do every day in the United States military, we have to take seriously, because our men's lives and our country's freedoms depend on it. We have to take our mission seriously. We have to take our men's lives seriously, but never take yourself too seriously. So I have a confession to make here as I close out. And sir, if you were on my left, I could talk as long as I want, because I wouldn't be able to see you. So I would have no idea. You can say 5 minutes. I don't know.
No, you're good. You're good.
No, thank you, sir. Sense of humor. I like that. So I have a confession to make, because none of us are perfect, and I'm not proud of this. But I had a moment, I don't know, 2 months ago maybe, where I was in the gym and got a whole bunch of nice parts and attachments. And I had a dumbbell locked into my left arm, and on my right arm I was getting ready to go down for a lift, and I had a parts malfunction, and I had a dumbbell flying this way, and I had an arm flying this way, and about ripped my shoulder out of its joint, and I had a spring fly up and hit me in the face, fortunately on the left side, so no damage to the eye. And when that happened, I absolutely had a moment of weakness where I had about a 30 to 45 second period where I stood up and I threw stuff across the gym. And sir, I could have used your list of code words, because I said a whole lot of things that some people might not appreciate. And I remember thinking in my head, life would be so much easier if I had two hands, and I had two hands, and I didn't have these burdens to bear. And after that moment of weakness, I sat down and I wrote myself a note that I try to read every day. And the note says, don't be upset when life gets hard. The struggle is what makes us stronger. Embrace it. Learn to love it. When what is hard becomes easy, challenge yourself to make it hard again. That's the only way that we truly grow. And I had a chaplain who told me once, he said, never pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a hard life. And I'll tell you this, and I tell it to young soldiers all the time, and I tell it to high school students when I speak to them, nothing great ever came from easy. Never. Not one time in the history of the world has something great ever come from easy. So when something is difficult in your life, or when something is difficult for one of your airmen or one of your soldiers, remind them. And it's hard to see it when you're down there, but be that positive influence that reminds that young soldier, that young airman, that the challenge that they're going through is what's going to make them the person that they're destined to become. The struggle is what makes us stronger. I appreciate it. I know you guys have a really busy schedule today, and I don't want to take up any more of your time, but thank you so much for the opportunity, sir.
You know, Colonel Dwyer, you know, as we were putting this conference together, take your seats. My vision for this conference is I wanted the attendees to leave with something more than just the speeches about where we are as a force, starting out with the spouses panel and ultimately with your remarks. And I think we met that intent. Your story, as well as others we've heard today, are give breath to what we do. And I appreciate you making the trip from Hunter. I know it's a long drive. I used to command the 118th. But for you to come here and share those moments with us, we really appreciate it. And I'm going to present you our conference coin, which seems very insignificant, but this coin represents all of us here and the message that you gave us today. Thank you very much.